wide lines. First we're going to learn is Amrinan, Teku, and we're going to learn from Lebek tonight.
Amrinan, Teku?
Yeah.
Okay. I have to battle Mike for hearing your Canadian accent and your Yeshiva's accent on top of it.
So here we were discussing if you have a hadas, a myrtle branch, that the top was cut off, and according to halacha, if the top is cut off, it's puzzle. If a berry grows on top, that will validate it. Now the question is, the berry grows on top. However, if it grows up on top during Yom Tov, on the onset of Yom Tov, it still was invalid because it was still cut. And then a berry grew on Yom Tov. So we wanted to know if once a hadas is exempt, once any mitzvah, this really applies to all mitzvahs. Once a mitzvah is exempt, is it totally exempt across the board? Is it always going to be exempt and no longer usable, or are we going to say that a mitzvah can never be exempt, even though it's true it was exempt at the time of Sukkah started, and it no longer was able and rejected to be used for a mitzvah? However, perhaps once the berry grows, it will be permitted. Now we said leimek tanoim. Perhaps this idea is machlekes tanoim. So it's a machlekes in the Mishnah if we hold that a mitzvah could be rejected or not. Now, halacha is avar v'laktam pasul. This is like what we mentioned before. Like Tarfin said, if one goes ahead and he picks off the berries, it'll be pasul. So if someone on Yom Tov picks off the berries, it's invalid. But the rabbi said it's kosher. Now we want to say, we're going to plug in this argument. If we're going to plug in this idea of the argument, if you need dichui or not, if a mitzvah needs to be exempted or not, we're trying to plug it in. We're trying to figure out that might be once something's rejected, it's always rejected. We want to apply that to be as if it's a machlekes tanam. So number one, in order to make this work, we need to say the rabbis and Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok both agree that a lulav doesn't have to be bound. Even if you tell me it needs to be bound, we don't learn the halachos of lulav from sukkah. By sukkah, we said that the sukkah has to have the schach put on first, has to have the walls put up, and then the schach. You can't do vice versa. So I might think by lulav, one has to bind the kosher. And if you bind the rava, the lulav, and the hadas together, if one of them are invalid, and then while it's already bound, you validate the other, for example, by picking off the berries, I may think it doesn't work like that, because at the time of the actual binding, it has to be kosher. You have to do an act of binding, which is a valid binding. So I might think that the answer is no, we don't learn that from sukkah. We're not going to learn the halach of taslim and asoi from sukkah. My love, commifically, is not that machlekes the man the apostle savar aminish dichoi el mitzvahs that Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok says that if you pick it on Yom Tov, it's going to be invalid. We're going to say that he holds once a mitzvah is rejected, and at the onset of Sukkot it was rejected, you can't go back by fixing it. And the one that says that it's kosher is going to say there's no dichoi el mitzvahs. Just because it's rejected doesn't mean it cannot come back and be validated. So So no, not necessarily what we lined up to be a machlekes tanam is not necessarily true, because perhaps everyone agrees that we don't say once a mitzvah is rejected, it can't be validated again. Machlekes is, do we learn lulav from sukkah? Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok said that we learn lulav from sukkah, and when you bind it, and when you actually go ahead and you bind the lulav and esrog, and the das, the rav, and the lulav together, if it was invalid, you bound the invalid set, and you by picking off the berries after it's already bound, you are sort of creating. When you bound it, it was invalid, and it was invalid. So your binding wasn't a real binding. And the one that holds that we don't learn lulav from sukkah, and the one who says that we don't learn lulav from so that's why Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok said that it's going to be invalid. But the rabbi said no, we don't learn lulav from sukkah. So even if it's true when you bind it wasn't valid, doesn't make a difference. We're not going to apply that idea. You have to create something, not from something which already was created. We don't apply that to lulav. Another way to answer this. Israel on lulav tarach agud. Really, machlekes is, does a lulav need to be bound? Now, if we do learn a lulav has to be bound, we will say there's a problem of binding an invalid set and then validating it once it's already set. This is the case of a lulav that has to be bound or not. That's the machlekes. The machlekes is, does the lulav have to be bound? The Tanya, and it's also that itself is a machlekes between different tanam. So number one, it's not a machlekes. We're not arguing in this case if something's rejected, could it come back? A. And B, what we are arguing over is if a lulav needs to be bound. And that itself is already a previous machlekes. The Tanya, because we learned, lulav bein agud. Bein she'eni agud kasher, that the rabbis say. A lulav that's not bound, it's still valid to fulfill your obligation of shaking it on sukkahs. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, agud kasher she'eni agud pasol. Rabbi Yehuda holds that it has to be bound. Now, my time, Rabbi Yehuda. Why is it Rabbi Yehuda holds that a lulav has to be bound together with the hadas and the rava? Yalif lekicha magudas ezay. That when they had to go and spray the para aduma water on someone who was contaminated to an impure body, they had to use a bundle of hyssop. They had to do an aguda. They had to bind it. And by asa rights, and you should pick and you should lakach. You should take for you on the first day. Because Hasam says by para aduma. Lakachtem magudas ezay. No, sorry, it wasn't paradum. It was when they were putting the blood on the mashkit for Pesach. Yeah. When you went ahead and you have to take a bundle to put the blood on the door frame. Ma'alan aguda. Then, in order to valid, it had to be a full bind. You have to take whatever they were using, the branches, and actually bind it together. Aguda. Here too is also aguda. So you say lakach and lakach. We have two. It says taking by the case of by blood by Pesach. It says taking by the binding of the lulav esrog and lulav hadas and a rava, and we can compare the two. And according to Rabbi, you need a valid binding. Now, Rabban Leslie lekicha, is that true? The rabbis hold we don't learn out the drasha of comparing lakach to lakach. Is that true? Man tamal. So if so, man tana. Who's the following that holds the tan rabban lulav mitzvah lagudai? We have a brayso that says a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah for one to bind the three species. Now, the imlav agdai kasher. But however, if you don't do it, you still are fulfilling your obligation. So it's a mitzvah. It's a nice thing to do. But if you don't do it, you still fulfill your obligation. Money. Who is that? Rabbi Yehuda. If it's Rabbi Yehuda, kilay agdai my kasher. Rabbi Yehuda said it has to be bound. If you don't bind it, it's invalid. So you cannot say that this brayso is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say that if you don't do it, it's not good. If it's okay. In fact, Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's not good if you don't do it. So, Irabanan, my mitzvah. But if it's the rabbis, what's the mitzvah? What's the commandment? Nor did we say that the rabbis say you don't have to bind it. So, the answer is really it is the rabbi. But the reason they say to bind it is not because that's the obligation. Just when you bind it together, it makes it that much more beautiful when you're doing the mitzvah in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there's no need to do it as an obligation. Rather, you're doing it to beautify it. If you don't do it, you still fulfill your obligation. Okay, we're on Lam again. I'm on Aleph 33a. We are 3 lines from the bottom by the 2 dots. Now, I'll show you another Merubin. Now, the Mishnah stated that if the berries are more than the leaves, then it's invalid. Hadas had berries, and it had to be, it didn't have berries, it had to be less. Amr Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda stated, Davar zeh Rabbeinu Hagadol Amru. Now, the following, Rabbeinu Hagadol, I guess it was Rabbi Yehuda, the great rabbi, said, B'makayim yeh be'ezroi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help him. Lo yishanu ela b'makayim echad. This halacha is that when it's all concentrated in one spot. But if it's a majority, but it's spread over the hadas, then it's going to be valid. So according to Rav Chisda, saying the name of Rabbeinu Hagadol, Rav, it was Rav. Rashi said it's Rav. It wasn't Rebbe. So in the name of Rav, so Rav Chisda said in the name of Rav that it has to be concentrated in one area. But if it's spread over, even though it's the majority, it will be kosher. Now, Amalei Rava, when we turn to the top of Lam Gimel base, the 33b, but the problem is, if it's spread over 2 and 3 spots, then it's speckled. And we learned in the Mishnah, not the Mishnah, but also we learned that if it's speckled, it's on Hadar. And if it's on Hadar, you're not Mekayim the mitzvah. Rather, this is what we meant to say. Our Mishnah states, if the berries are more numerous than the leaves, then it's going to be invalid. And this is what Rav Chisda meant to say in the name of Rab. And Hamakayim, you have Ezra, only if they're blackberries. Blackberries invalidate the hadas. Avanav Yerakais, but if they are green berries, mine hadasu, it's the same color as the hadas, and it's not going to really, it blends in, so it doesn't. There's no contrast to it. The kosher. Amar Papa, Adaimish Kashchayres. If that's true, then Rav Papa explains, and red is like black, meaning if it doesn't blend in, then it's going to be invalid. That's the problem. But if they blend in, it's not a problem. The Mayan, Shchayres Damyan, Amar Chanina, Haidam Shachar Adamhu El Sholka. And he was going on the reason of Rav Chanina. Chanina hold that dam, black blood, is really blood, but it just went bad. So the point is that blood, when it comes to halachis and blood, also in the Torah, we do compare black to red. Therefore, here too, the same halacha would apply to black to red. Okay, we're up to the 2 dots on Lam Gimel on the Beis, the first 2 dots. In Mi'atan Kasha, we said that if you go ahead and you make them and you pluck them off on if you pluck them off, you could revalidate the das, meaning if the berries are more numerous than the leaves, it's not a problem, and you could rectify the situation by taking off the berries. Now, in Miyot Kasher, the Miatinu Emas. When did you go ahead and remove the berries? If it's before you went ahead and you bound them together, of course it's going to be kosher, because you didn't pick them up yet. When you bound them, they already were plucked off, so it was fully valid. Ella lebasar de la agde. Rather, it has to be it was after you bound them. Now, if that's true, that means when you binded them, they were invalid, and then you plucked off the berries from a already bound hadas with the lulav. So therefore, dichoy miikara hu tifshoy minei dichoy miikara. So we should learn from here that we have a good proof. We have a proof that even though something was rejected, meaning I picked it up, I had the berries were the majority, and then I bind them, and then I plucked them off. See, once I picked them off, it was rejected at that time. It was exempt. We couldn't fulfill the obligation with it. We should learn from here that even though you picked it up, and even though now was a time to do the mitzvah of it, and it already was rejected, only then did you remove the berries. It works. So we see from here, our whole question on the previous page is now answered. That once something's rejected, it could come back and be validated. On that we say loy. On that we say so therefore we're saying, hold on. We should clarify from here that yeah, fine. So now we're going to say, it's like, no. Now we're going to say, really, really, at the end of the day, it was after you went ahead and you already tied them up. The kasavar, but the one who said that you could pluck them off and they'll still be valid, even though it's after you was bounded, or after you bound it. Agad hazmana ba'almu. That he didn't hold of them that like Rabbi Yehuda held that one has to, is obligated in actually tying them together. This Mandamar held no. There's no mitzvah to go ahead and do it. It's a nice thing to do. It's hazmana. You're preparing it. You're getting it ready, and by binding it, it's just easier to do. But there's no mitzvah of it. And just picking it up and preparing it is not called preparation. It's not enough. It's just nothing. We don't look at it as if this is called now the mitzvah is ready to go, and therefore you cannot learn from here that once something's exempt, it's not. It's not exempt forever. Because in this case, it wasn't exempt yet because you didn't fulfill the mitzvah yet. And according to this Band Amar, one did not have to really bind it, which he wasn't going like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. That we go further. The aim and biyamtiv. Now John's not on the call, but he was talking about this yesterday. That we said one's not allowed to take, one's not supposed to go ahead and take them off on Yom Tov. And because we'll see in a minute what's the problem of plucking them off. What's the problem? Now, the truth is, this was, I think, John was talking about a different case, but this sort of covers his problem. Now, what happens if one goes ahead and transgresses the halacha, and he does take them off on Yom Tov? Is it still valid? My kosher. The answer is yes. It is still valid and it still could be used. The ashchar emas. Now the question is though, when did it become black? Because we learned previously, if they're green, they're fine, and then they come back, that's when they're a problem. Now, you went ahead and you picked them on Yom Tov. It's going to be, if you went ahead and you picked them on Yom Tov, it's still going to be okay. The question is though, when did it come back black? Ilim the ashchar me'etmol. If they became black yesterday, i.e. before Yom Tov, now, if they became black yesterday, that means they went into Yom Tov, they already were exempt because it was majority black. So let's learn from here that that once something's exempt, it can't come back. Elalav the ashkar b'yom tov. No, really, you don't have a proof from there. We could say that on the onset of Yom Tov, it was still valid, and then something happened overnight and it became black. Nira v'nitcha shema minot. Nira v'nitcha chayz v'nira. Perhaps we could come and say now that once something, now that when you wake up in the morning and it's going to be, now they wake up in the morning and now that it's exempt, we could say that once you see something and it's exempt, it could come back and still not be, and it still could be used. So, which is a little less than the first case. The first case, it went on the onset of Yom Tov, it was invalid. The time for the mitzvah came at night. The time for the potential mitzvah, the day arrived, and it was invalid due to the numerous black ones. We wanted to say that it was exempt. We could learn from here something which is exempt on the onset could come back and be revalidate itself. And then we say no, it became black on Yom Tov. So then we say, okay, at least we could say once you see something to be invalid, it could come back and rectify the situation. Say what? Nope, that's not the case either. Really, it was exempt. Really, it became black on Erev Yom Tov, and therefore on the onset of Yom Tov already was exempt. At least let's figure out now. Let's figure out. Okay, then let's say the other thing. Let's go and say that once something's exempt, it could come back. If you can't answer from here, the other case that if it's in the morning, once you see it, once you actually see it, and it's going to be once you see it and it was exempt, you cannot go ahead and learn from there that you could rectify it. But you could rectify the first one from the onset of Yom Tov. We could fix it. So we found the proof. This is the second one because we found the proof previously. No, this is the actual proof. This is the proof that if one goes ahead and if on the onset of Yom Tov it turns black and you come to Yom Tov with it black and you pluck it off, it's going to be permitted. And we do not say once something's exempt from a mitzvah, it's exempt forever. Rather, you can rectify it. Now, Tan Rabbanon. We do not. You're not supposed to go ahead and remove the berries on Yom Tov because of Rabbi Lazar. The reason why you shouldn't do it because you're fixing something. You're fixing something and you're creating now you're making it that it's fixed and usable for the mitzvah on Yom Tov. So therefore, how could you go ahead? Previously we said that you could, that if you do it, it's okay. Why is it okay? You're over misakin mana. You're over the issue of fixing something on Yom Tov, and that should make it. And once you're over a aveira of Shabbos, it should be unusable till the end of Yom Tov. So no, the reason why he picked it was not to fix the adas. He was hungry. He started plucking off the berries and he ate it, and then he thought, "Hey, look at this! I now have a kosher adas." So he didn't do it with the intention for it to be fixed. He did it with the intention for him to go eat. And you have to throw in that Rabbi Bar Shimon held that something which you do unintentionally is permitted on Shabbos. Because if we say that something which you do unintentionally is still forbidden on Shabbos, even though he ate them without the intention to fix it, but he ate it and he fixed it, whether you like it or not, and that's an Avera. So you see from here that he must be going like his father, that he holds that there's something unintentional on Shabbos is permitted. Now, everyone agrees. Reb Shimon does hold that if you do something, and it's for sure the outcome is indefinite, it will for sure happen. Like, this would be the example. By eating the berries, by eating off the berries, you for sure are validating the hadas. Then everyone will agree that it's awesome. Only when something you do unintentionally, which might happen, might not. But something which you do unintentionally, but the outcome is for certain, then it's going to be invalid. So the answer is that in this case, that you have another Hishana. So it was never for certain that you'd use this Hishana. So it was never for certain you were misaking a Hishana for a mitzvah. Just because you ate berries and you were like, if it's Pesach time and you eat the berries off the Hishana, you're not going to say, oh wow, no, misaking mana, you fixed it, now you can go use it when Sukkah comes along. So it's because it's not applicable. So same thing here. I had another Hishana. So it wasn't for certain I'll be using this Hishana for my lulav. So you don't have this halacha that's for certain. So I could use a different one. Not necessarily is it for certain that I was in Masakin Man. It's only Masakin Man if I actually pick it up to be used with if I bind it together with my lulav. So that's the answer. It wasn't for certain. Tarabanan. Hotar agdai biyantayv. What happens if one goes ahead and they tied it with a knot. They bound the lulav, the hadas and the rava together, and then with the knot, and then it became untied. Now, what do you not allowed to make a knot on it? So what you do is you tie it like what you do with flowers. Is you wrap it around, and then you take the end of it and you slip it through the wrap, and therefore it's tight enough. So why don't we go ahead and make a bow? Why do you have to do this way that you don't make any knot? At least you can make a bow, and a bow's committed on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So Hamani Rabbi Hudi. So who are we referring to? Who's the one that said this halacha? It's Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda is the one that said the halacha that you have to slip it through. Now, the Amar Aniva Kishir Ma'al Yosef. Rabbi Huda holds that a bow is equal to a knot. A bow is usher to go ahead and you can't tie a bow on Shabbos or any Yom Tov. Now, therefore you have to slip it through. Rabbi Yehuda, Algan Ma'al Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda, remember, Rabbi Yehuda also holds you have to have it be bound. So this type of slipping through is not really truly bound. It's not a true knot. It's not tight. It could come off at any time. So we're going to catch 22. If you're going with Rabbi Yehuda, the reason why you said you have to tie it around and then slip it through is because you're going like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that a bow doesn't work. But if you're going like Yehuda and a bow doesn't work, then the slipping through also doesn't work, because that's not enough to be called bound. To answer that, the answer to that is that Tana, he held, like Rabbi Yehuda in one aspect, that a bow is usher on Shabbos and Yom Tov, but he argued with him in the other aspect, and you don't need, the binding was not a mitzvah, rather the binding is not an obligation, rather it's a mitzvah, it's an enhancement, that's not required, therefore I could just simply fulfill the obligation of enhancement of Hidr mitzvah, of Ezek Heli V'Anveyo, I'm going to glorify Kaddish my God, that is enough to wrap it around and slip it through. Because at the end of the day, it points to beautify. I see that it's bound, even though it's not called, I guess you can't call it halachically bound according to Rabbi Yehuda, but it's not enough. But it's enough to fulfill the other opinion that the point is just for beauty. All right. Any questions?
If you do something inadvertently on Shabbos, you bump into a light switch and the light goes on. That's unintentional.
That's so.
But if you bump into it again to try to turn it off, that's
hold on. So there's something called nesasik. Something like you don't know what's flying. So like The difference would be is that you flip the switch, and I don't know why you flip the switch, and that does something which is permitted. But sometimes flipping the switch also turns on the light. There's a loose wire. I don't know, whatever it is, right? So the flipping switch does something which is permitted on Shabbos, right? It just causes a chain reaction of everything mechanical, nothing electric, whatever it does. You can use your imagination. And at the same time, there's a loose wire. Sometimes it turns on, sometimes it doesn't. So if the light ends up turning on, perhaps you could say, don't apply this to halacha. Perhaps you could say in that case it was unintentional. You don't want the light to turn on, right? You wanted the chain react, whatever happened to take place. And it wasn't for sure. But if it would be for sure, the light would turn on. It's not permitted. Meaning, if flipping the light switch does one thing which is permitted, but at the same time it turns on the light, which is forbidden, if that happens all the time, and that is for certain going to take place, then you can't flip the switch.
Especially if you got kids.
Even though you don't want the light. Even if you don't want the light. So that would be the case, right? Bumping into light switch is just
a total accident.
A total accident, a total accident. There's nothing to talk about.
Okay.
A total accident is that, well, here he wanted the berries. He knew he was picking the berries.
Right.
Just the outcome of the forbidden outcome was unintentional. Right. That's a difference. Something which is totally a mistake. That's something else. And if he tripped and he fell and he hit the berries and he went flying and then he splat and then he flew all over the place. I don't know. It's all really unintentional. Could be something. Okay, says the Mishnah. We're up to Lam Gimel on the base 33b towards the bottom in the Mishnah. So now we dealt with the lulav, we dealt with the hadas, and now we're on to the harava, the willow. Says the Mishnah. Harava gezula v'yavasha psula. A stolen harava and a dry one is invalid. Shalashira v'shel hanidachas psula. If it's from an Ashira tree, which was used for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship, or a city which over 50% were found to be guilty in idol worship, then it's going to be invalid. Nikdam Reishai, if the top got cut off, Niffer to Aleha, or it all fell off, then it's going to be invalid. If now it's Hitzfatsafa Psula. We'll learn out this type of Hitzfasa leaf, this type of willow called Hatzvasa is invalid, and we'll see anything more about why it's invalid. Kumusha, if it's withered, the Nisharu Miksa Aleha, or it has less than 50% of the leaves on it, Mishalbal Kshera. So if it's less than 50% left on it, it'll be invalid. Mishalbal Kshera, and if it's Baal, the Baal means a field. We'll see in a minute. The Torah says it has to be Arvi Nachal, has to be an Arava of the stream. Now, the stream means that you don't have to water it. It gets watered by itself, right? It draws nutrients. It draws water by itself. Now, what about a field, which you do have to go ahead and you do have to water it? So it seems to be saying that's going to be. Hold on. No, okay. So Baal is a field. Sorry, a Baal is a field which is not near a water source, but nevertheless, somehow, some way, you don't have to, whatever the reason is, you don't have to go and water it. Whether it's some underground stream underneath it. Whatever the case is, the Baal is that it's not on the river, rather it's in a field which waters itself, that is going to still fulfill the mitzvah of it has to be by the banks of the river, and we'll see in a minute exactly why it's valid. Says the Tanarabana, says the Gemara. Arvi Nachal. The Torah says that it has to be willows of a brook or willows of a stream. Hagdilin al Hanachal. It has to grow on the banks of the stream, brook, or river. Now, Davar Acher, another way to understand it. Arvi Nachal Sha'ala Shalah Mishach Nachal. That it grows by itself like those on the banks of a Nachal. That's what we're getting to. That it doesn't have to be that it's actually on the banks of Nachal. Now, it is nice. It is more of a hiddur. It's more of a stringency to try to get a rubbish which actually grow on the banks of a river. But even if not, as long as they don't have to be watered and they grow like those types, then it is going to be permitted. Tani Idach.
So if you have to water them,
it seems to say that if you have to water them yourself, it's going to be a problem. Rashi says, Baal is a field that you don't have to water, and it's enough just with rainfall. So, that's what it looks like. Now, I'm not sure what you have to look up the exact halacha, if that's how we apply it. Now, Tani Idach, we went elsewhere. Arvinachal in the Ella Arvinachal shel Baal. So there we go. Now we said Arvinachal, that only means one of the actual stream, on the streams. Or in the field that can water, that is enough to draw nutrients, to have the rainwater is enough. How do you know of the waters of the mountains? How do you know that the ones in the mountains are permitted? It says Arvinachal, it says plural. Anywhere, no matter what you have to do to it to get it to grow, if it's the right species, if it's the right willow branch, it's fine. It'll be permitted because Arve is plural. Arvinachal, the willows on the stream. It means come to why willow. Just say the willow of the stream. Why willows? The plural is coming to include everything, any type. Now, to return to the top of Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph to 34a. Abishal argues. He learns Arvi Nachal doesn't mean to say that in anywhere where it grows. Rather, Arvi Shtayim, it says Arava twice. It says the willows twice. Achas Lulav. One was that we had to take the willows for the lulav in order to fulfill the obligation. Achas leMikdash. And one was that that there was the mitzvah of going around the mizbeach on Sukkot, specifically in the Beis Hamikdash. They went around every day with willows. This is what we do on Hoshana Rabbah as a remembrance. But in the Beis Hamikdash, there was a mitzvah to do it. Rabbanan, so therefore, you have machlekes. The rabbis say the plural of Arvi Nachal, the willows, the branch, the Arvi Nachal, the willows of the stream, according to the rabbis, it's going to teach you it could be anywhere. It could grow anywhere, not specifically by the banks. Abishol learns, no, the plural is going to teach me one mitzvah of lulav and one mitzvah in the temple. Rabbanan, l'mikdash manaluhu. But then, according to the rabbis, if they're using the plural to learn that it could be used for anywhere, how did they ever know there was a mitzvah of bringing the willows in the temple? So, the answer is that was a halacha Moshe Messina. The Amar Abasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Ashi, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, stated Esther Netiyos, that the halacha that and the halachas of Shemitah, which are, in fact, they're already into it now, that is 30 days before Shemitah, which we're already into that period, tomorrow, I guess, we'll be in that period already, then one is not allowed to start planting, because it might take root in Shemitah. However, if you have a type of a field which has something like 10 trees to every base sa'a, then it is permitted for whatever the reason is. That's one. It is permitted to go ahead and prune and take care of the field. Arava, and then the mitzvah of Arava in the temple, Nisach HaMayim, and the pouring of the water which happened every day over Sukkot in the temple. So you see from here that Arvei Nachal doesn't have to be used to teach us about the temple. The plural Arvei Nachal, the willows of the banks, could teach us that the willows plural comes to include any type of willow. And how do we know about the temple? That they brought the Rava in the temple, that was taught from Malach Meshim Yisrael. Tan Rabbanan. Arvei Nachal, the Gilois al Nachal. Now, the Torah teaches, the Brisa says that it has to be an Arvei Nachal. It has to be the willows of a stream that grow on the banks. This excludes the Tafsafa Hagdilim B'Veinahar. This excludes the Tafsafa type of willow, which we'll see soon what it is, that grows between the mountains, not by the banks of it. Amar Zera, Mikra. Now, we're going to bring a proof from a pasuk in Yecheskel that Hashem went to Yecheskel and he told him the bad news, and when Nebuchadnezzar is going to come and start the exile. And Hashem said, Kach al Maim Rabim, take from the mighty waters, Tafsafa Shemai. And Nebuchadnezzar is going to take from the mighty waters why? Because the Jews were the Yidden, the Bnei Yisrael was supposed to go ahead and take from the mighty waters and fulfill the Torah, but rather Tafsafa Shema. They determined themselves into Tafsafa. Now, Amalei Baya, we're going to explain this over here. Amalei Baya, the Dilma Pirushi Komefarish Kach Alamayim Rabim, Umayni is Tafsafa. Maybe. So what we want to learn is that Hashem saying to Yecheskel, saying that the Jews we're supposed to take from the mighty waters, and because they unfortunately messed up over the past 400 years while 800 years while they were in Eretz Yisrael, they are like tzafzafa, which is inferior. So we learn from here that tzafzafa is inferior. Now on that, Abai said perhaps it's just explaining that they should have taken from the mighty waters, and the mighty waters is tzafzafa. Rather, so tzafzafa is not inferior. Rather, it's the right type of hadas. It's a hadas equal to all others. Now, on that we answer in Cain, my shemai. If you look at the verse, it said, tzafzafa shemai. Tzafzafa is its name. Why did it say that? If it was explaining it, all the pasuk have to say, take from the mighty waters, tzafzafa. You should take tzafzafa from the mighty waters. Now, what does it mean tzafzafa shemai? So the Gemara goes on to explain, Amar Bavo, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Amar Bavo, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is that? This is what Hashem said. Ani amarti shal Yisrael if they kikach al ma'im rabbi. That originally the plan was for the children of Israel to be in front of me, like they were supposed to take from the mighty waters. Umaynu arava. Now that's the arava. The arava is the higher level living the life in Eretz Yisrael. Vehin shemai atzman ketzafzafa shebaharim. But they made themselves, they degraded themselves to tzafzafa, like the tzafzafa of the in the mountains.
What?
The tzafzafa, the willow.
Right.
So we see from here that the way Rabbi Boruch explains it, Hashem is saying that really the Yidden were supposed to be on the level of Arava, the higher level. They turned themselves into tzafzafa. They turned themselves into the inferior product called tzafzafa. So we see from here, tzafzafa is inferior, and that's why it's not supposed to be used for sukkahs. Now, the lulav and please do the lulav. Now, ikidamasni, lala haikra. Now, there's another way to relearn what we just said. Amasnista is going on our Mishnah. Kachal ma'im ram tzafzafa shemai. The pasuk said, "How do we know not to use?" Our Mishnah said, "How do you know not to use tzafzafa?" Or the Mishnah, I'm not sure our Mishnah. Rather, because the pasuk, the verse in Yecheskel said, "You take from mighty waters," and its name is tzafzafa. Maskel Rav Zera, and Rav Zera asks, "V'dilma perushika mefarish." And perhaps Rav Zera is saying, maybe he's coming to explain it. Kachal ma'im rabim ma'ini tzafzafa. Maybe you're not saying that there's a arava and tzafzafa is inferior. Rather, perhaps you're saying, take from the mighty waters, you're supposed to take the tzafzafa. And came my shmai. On that we said, what's with the name? Why we think tzafzafa is its name? I had Kadosh Baruch Hu said that really the children of Israel were supposed to be great and take from the waters, Mainu Arava. They're supposed to be on the level of Arava. They turned themselves they made themselves to be called tzafzafa of the mountains. Now we have yet to clarify what is the tzafzafa and what is the arava. Now the Gemara goes into it. Tana Rabbanan. Ezeu arava, v'zeu tzafzafa. What's the which one is the arava and which one is the tzafzafa? Arava kana shala ed adaim. So the arava, which is what you're supposed to be taking, is the stem is red, but ola shala mashayich, and the leaf is longish, upiachol, and the edge around the leaf is smooth. Tzafzafa kana shala lava. Tzafzafa is white. The stem is white, not red. But ola shala agul, and the leaves are not long, rather they're shorter and rounder. Upia doimilamago. And the mouth, and meaning the around it, is like a serrated knife, meaning an arava is just nicely smooth, while the tzafzafa goes up it, like as it goes around, it's serrated. But Tanya doimilamago kasher. Why are you telling me that it's like a mago which is serrated, like a sickle? But elsewhere we learned that if the leaves of the arava is like a sickle, it's valid. So doimil masar puzzle. But if it's like a saw, it's going to be puzzle. The difference is that a magal, a sickle, that they're equally serrated, and they all sort of go in one direction. While a saw is different. If you look at a serrated knife, they always have usually depends on serrated knife. There's different types of serrators. There's one large one and one small one. Large one and small. That's the difference between a saw and a sickle. Now, Amarabaya, so we see from here, but whatever the case is, we see that a sickle is kosher. So why are you saying tzafzafa? It's not. It's white. It's smallish round, and it's a sickle, but the sickle's fine. We learned that it's serrated like a sickle is fine. So Rabbiya, Kitanya hi bechilfa gila. That was not talking about when we said if it's serrated like a sickle, it's not going on the tafsafa, it's rather going like the chilfa willow. So Amar Rabbiya, Shma mina hay chilfa gila kashel shana. So we learn from here that this chilfa, a chilfa willow, is kosher for Ishana. Pshita, it's obvious, we just said that. The same now, so we said, because since it has an additional name, it's not called a willow, it's called the chilfa willow. Yeah, this previously I might think that if you add on a name, it might disqualify it, because this is not the typical arava we're talking about. That we say is fine. Now, on that we still have a question. But at the end of the day, maybe it should be. And if there's an additional name, why isn't it asur? So the answer was that the Arvinach, the Torah says it should be it should be in a rava from the banks of the river. It says plural. That's coming to include anything, even if there's an additional name. Now we're going to end here, but just to add on that at the end of the day, so we said the sickle. So the halacha is that the chilfa, the chilfa willow is permitted, and the reason is that it's red, its leaves are long, but the only issue is that it's like a sickle, it's really like a sickle. So that's okay. But the tafsafa is all three. It's white, not red. It's short and round, not long, and it is serrated. Even though it's serrated like a sickle, it's still going to be invalid because it has the other two. And the commentaries do point out that any willow, which is like a saw, that means it's going. We said there's different types of serrations and it's going in different directions. Even if it's red and even if it's long, it'll still be invalid.